Hi everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Rebecca New and I'm the Head of Art.
And I'm Rachel Donnelly and I'm Head of Partnerships.
We want to extend a very, very warm welcome to you all, and it's so lovely to already feel the buzz in the room. In these unique surroundings of IWM London, for our wonderful symposium to celebrate the success, the many successes really, of the IWM 1480 Now Legacy Fund, a dynamic multi-year partnership programme of art commissions across the UK. We hope that today will be a platform for really exciting conversations about art commissioning, what it means to work in partnership on a local, national and international level, and importantly, a day to be inspired by the brilliant creators and thinkers in this room. We thought it would be a great start to the day, rather than hearing too much from me, to show you a short film about the Legacy Fund and the great people we've worked with over the last 4 years. Wow. What an inspiring film, and I mean, lots of you will have recognised elements of it, and thank you to those that put it together. I think it really is quite humbling and pays testament to what's been achieved. And that we are here today, of course, demonstrates that we've reached a huge milestone in the Legacy Fund programme, which, as the film referenced, began in 2021 and was based on the financial legacy of the transformative First World War Centenary Commission programme 1418 Now. And Jenny and Nigel and others were part of that and are in the room. The symposium takes place in the final phase of the programme and offers us a fantastic opportunity to bring together Legacy Fund partners, artists, cultural sector colleagues and commentators, supporters, and wider sector partners to discuss the profoundly personal impacts of their commissions, alongside potentially the organisational change and community transformation that was able to be achieved. It's a chance to learn about the commissions and to hear about the challenges as well as the exciting opportunities that have happened, and hopefully today be a space for new conversations about future opportunities around art commissioning and in cultural and public space. The Legacy Fund is a multi-layered programme of 20 art commissions supported by diverse partnerships and programmes. At its heart, it's about dynamic and exciting opportunities for artists to work with collections, to work with spaces and stories, and to engage audiences with the heritage of conflict. It's a programme that has taught us a huge amount and critically has confirmed that audiences want to see more of artists, more of their spectacular work, and more of organisations like us at IWM and yours supporting their practice. You will hear today from some of the artists we've worked with, and I'm sure you'll feel as inspired as us in terms of ambition and diversity of thinking, the ways that they've provoked new questions and offered audiences new ways into our subjects and stories.
Of course, the programme is also about developing new, and we are very confident in saying this, lasting partnerships with a diverse range of organisations across the UK. Central to delivering the commissions has been working together with our partners, sharing expertise with one another, learning from one another, and very importantly, being the kind of critical friends who want you to succeed again and again. At IWM, we want to do more of this, working locally, nationally, and internationally, so that we can develop partnerships that inspire artists, communities, and audiences to stretch their own practice, to ask new questions and challenge received wisdoms. Over the course of the programme, we have constantly been inspired by the breadth, range, and diversity of ideas and activities that artists, communities, and partners have created. Your ambitions and your imaginations are breathtaking. We also want to take a moment to thank our brilliant IWM Legacy Fund team. Adam Rimmer, Charlotte Pierce, Iris Veazey, Sarah Gibbon, and Susie Elliott. Their dedication and energy is the foundation stone of this programme, and we cannot praise them highly enough. Thank you so much to all of you. We would also like to say thank you to former IWM Director General Di Lees, as well as our Art Commissions Committee, past and present, for their vision in developing the Legacy Fund. And to former colleagues Liz Robertson and Lula Rappaport for their fantastic work also. And now for some very important practical stuff. The nearest toilets are on level 3, so it's one level below where we are now. So you walk back down the stairs, and either side of you, there are 2 galleries, 2 temporary galleries, Churchill and Cartoons on my right, and on the left, War and the Mind. You'll have to walk through those galleries and follow the signs for the nearest toilets there. If you hear a fire alarm today at any point, it is not a practice. So if the fire alarm does go off, wherever you are, whether it's here or in another part of the museum, please do follow IWM staff or volunteers who will guide you to the nearest fire exit and out into the park surrounding the museum. The IWM team are also on hand at each turn to guide you through the day, to help answer questions, so please don't hesitate to approach any of us if you need something. And a final word of thanks to our partner organisations, artists and communities with us today. Thank you for trusting us, thank you for your generous spirit, and thank you for being with us today. Enjoy yourselves and have a brilliant day. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Susie Elliott and I have the best job in the world because I'm a partnerships manager on the IWM 1489 Legacy Fund. Thank you Rachel and Becky for that lovely welcoming address, not a dry eye from the team here. I'm delighted to kick off our first session by inviting a woman to the stage who needs no introduction. She's the chair of our first session, the playwright, novelist, critic, and broadcaster, Bonnie Greer. Please give her a warm welcome.
Very much. Is this thing, what's that? What's ringing? Oh, right. It's probably my ghost on those steps, because those steps are killers. I got a lot to say, but I ain't gonna say it, so we can have time for our artists. It's good to see Jenny again and Nigel, and just to say my part in this, I was deputy chair of the British Museum, for real, and I met Jenny maybe before that, and talked about with her being on the main committee of forming the commemoration. And the thing that I remember, and I hope I'm not wrong about this, but the thing that I remember, one of the things, is Lord Danett, who was warden of the Tower at the time, came into the committee, he was on the committee, and he put this tulip on the table. Now, I was sitting next to him, and I knew this was not his bailiwick, this tulip. But it began, I think, and he was nervous about it because he was going to commission artists and they were going to do something with the moat. Of course, that became legendary, and it is legend. It was a beautiful moment, especially for me as someone who worked in culture, to see that extension. Culture is what we make. Art is what we do as human beings, besides war. That is what we do, and it is natural to us. I also want to say that artists, creatives, more and more, we have to learn to talk, because to make work is a collaborative, but also a deeply silent interior thing. And so for these creatives and their commissioners to stand and talk to you is not an easy thing to do. So I'm going to hand over, and I'm going to ask each one, when they're ready to speak, to introduce themselves, talk about their work, then we'll all have a conversation. So I want to give them a round of applause now, because to be able to leap from an object or an idea or an event, catastrophe like a war, to move into your own personal expression, your own personal encounter, and your own cultural encounter is a huge leap of humanity. So I want to give them an applause. Who wants to go first? And please introduce yourself and la la. As they say, la la.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? I'm a little bit overawed to be here in such illustrious company, but thank you very much for inviting me. Just unlocking my laptop. My name is Siân Addicott, and I'm director of Ffotogallery. Ffotogallery is based in Cardiff, in Wales. I'm going to talk very briefly about the organisation and then give Audrey the opportunity to talk further about the project that we collaborated on. Ffotogallery, based in Cardiff, as I said, was Wales's first gallery dedicated to photography. It was established in 1978, which was a period of radical change for photography in the UK. I joined in April 2022, and as an organisation, we took a period of reflection to look at what the most important debates in contemporary photography were and how they related to the location of the gallery in Wales. We also launched a project to reimagine our archives, being mindful that archives are not neutral, to look at whose voices had been excluded and whose stories had been shared. At Ffotogallery, it's important for us to look at photography as a social practice, as a collaborative way of telling stories. I've been very much influenced by the writings of artist and academic Ariella Azoulay, particularly her thoughts on rethinking the history of photography. Traditionally, the origins of photography are referred to as the early 1800s, aligned with the technological developments of the practice of fixing images. But Azoulay asks us to rethink this and consider the origins of photography in the early phases of European colonial enterprise, so back to 1492. And with this perspective, we can see how the development of photography benefited from a regime of rights and privileges. So through our programming at Ffotogallery, we are really keen to support artists and projects which challenge colonialist approaches to image making and storytelling. In 2019, the Welsh Government also declared its ambition to become the world's first nation of sanctuary, with commitments to support people seeking sanctuary to rebuild their lives. But the reality of people seeking sanctuary in Wales is that they still face many challenges. But it is important for us, through photography, to share stories of people who have faced similar challenges. I first became aware of the Chagos Islands perhaps only 10 years ago after reading about it in the news. And I was shocked at how little mainstream media attention there was, particularly after the International Court of Justice judgment in 2019 that the UK had acted unlawfully. We'll find out a bit more about that from Audrey shortly. I was also struck by the unjust struggle of such a very small community trying to fight against the UK and US government's action. It was a great opportunity for us when we found out about the 1418 Now Legacy Fund Commission and put in an application to work with an artist to bring the stories of the Chagosian communities to a wider audience. And that is when I first met Audrey, so I'd like to hand over to you now, Audrey.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there you go. Thank you. Hi, everyone. There's a lot of you. I'm Audrey Albert, Audrey Albert, however you want to pronounce it. I'm a Mauritian Chagosian photographer. I kind of identify as a multidisciplinary artist now. A lot of people have told me that my work was multidisciplinary, and I think I do agree with that. I'm also a creative facilitator, freelancer, and I work at SODA, the School of Digital Arts, at MMU at the moment, for a collective called A Particular Reality, which is based in multiple unis across the UK. And it's about making art schools and art spaces more inclusive, safer for global majority students and staff, and also more anti-racist. I guess before telling you about Belongers, which is the commission and exhibition I've worked on, produced by Ffotogallery in partnership with the Imperial War Museum, for people who aren't aware of the Chagos Archipelago, I'll give you a bit of context. So the Chagos Archipelago are multiple islands found in the middle of the Indian Ocean. They're really close to the Maldives. I don't know how many of you know about them or are aware of them. Yeah, so very few nods. So I'm from Mauritius. Mauritius used to be a British colony. We got our independence less than 55 years ago, and we got our independence kind of
off the backs of Shogosian people and the Shogosian community. So the Chagos was part of the Mauritian territory, and it's kind of blurry what happened historically. Some Mauritian historians claim that the Chagos was willingly kind of given to the UK or stayed with the UK by Mauritian politicians who wanted to be in power then. And other historians claim that Mauritius was coerced to give the Chagos to the UK in exchange for Mauritian independence. The Chagos was then leased to the US since then. The US turned them into a military base. It's still a military base now. A lot of the modern day wars, genocides that we know about, unfortunately, a lot of the missiles were kind of launched from there, from where my grandparents are from, the main island, which is Diego Garcia. I started kind of being very curious about my heritage, about where my grandparents were from, mostly because my grandma never really talked about it, and my granddad was always super vocal about it. And in my family, even though we knew we have Shogosian heritage, it was kind of a bit of a taboo to mention it to other people. And it's only through research and working with the community that I realized or got to understand why that was. And Shogosians faced lots of racial discrimination when they came to Mauritius. A lot of them are Afro-descendants. And a lot of people from the community had to hide the fact that they were from the Chagos. So I kind of understood my grandma's reluctance to talk about it to strangers or to mention it to other people. It had to be this hush-hush thing that stayed within our family, but that made me even more curious, and I wanted to find out more, which is why my work is all about Shogosian history, Shogosian struggle, but I mostly want to focus on the pride and joy that there is to be Shogosian, and that comes with that identity. I want my work to kind of stray as far as I can to just being extractive or leaning towards poverty porn almost. There is a lot of generational trauma. It's a very weighted kind of history. I will encourage you, if you're not aware of exactly what happened, how the forceful displacement was done, to go and research that and find out more for yourselves. This is one of the images that I created for Belongers. So I have been working on the themes of post-colonialism, culture, notions of home since 2017 with the community. And my work slowly became collaborative and co-creative. Like I said, I didn't want to place myself in an extractive position. I wanted to create with people and give people the space to not have agency, because they have it and they have a voice, but just use, I guess, my practice as a medium to tell their own stories. So I did that. It all started with a photo series called Matter Out of Place, and that slowly evolved into a creative community project, which is intergenerational, called Shogosians of Manchester. In this kind of project, I lead workshops, intergenerational photographic-based workshops, where we explore kind of our own memories connected to our ancestors, our grandparents or parents. But it's also a space where we can come together, speak in our native language, share recipes, moments together, learn from each other as well, learn more about our own history, oral history, or Shogosian food. So it's kind of very cultural based. For Belongers, I really wanted to focus, like I mentioned, on agency, on the community, and on the multiplicity of Shogosian identities. What does it mean to be Shogosian now, living in the UK, or living in Mauritius, or living in the Seychelles? I haven't worked with Shogosians from the Seychelles yet, but I do want that to happen one day. So what does it mean to be in those different places that are not quite home? And do we make these places home, and how do we do that? And how do we express our identities? How do we live our cultures in places that will never be home or don't feel like home? So the processes were, I wanted to make portraits and make collaborative portraits with people from the community. But I wanted them to take the lead and to be the creative directors of the portraits. So people picked the locations where they wanted the shoot to happen. They picked what they wanted to wear. They picked what expression they wanted to have on their faces and how they wanted to pose. A lot of people from the community picked areas that were close to nature, and I really wanted to explore our connection to the land, to guardians of the land that some of us have never ever been to. I also wanted to explore how the Chagos for all of us now is just this. It lives in memory, it lives in this fragmented memory, and that's the only way we can access it. So for a descendant like me, I've never been, I've only seen it in photos, or I know about it in stories that my grandparents or people from the community have told me. So I wanted to represent these stories in the best way that I could through portraits, and these are some of the images from the exhibition, some of the portraits that I made. Through this process, I also met some amazing Chagossian artists and creatives. And for me, it only felt natural to invite them to also showcase their work during this exhibition, which is my first solo exhibition in the UK. So it's something I'm very proud about. So the exhibition has got portraits, it's got film, it has got cyanotypes, which is a process that I work with in my Chagossians of Manchester workshops. And with this project, I kind of explored traditional Chagossian remedies using the process of cyanotypes. We've also worked on a research wall to kind of put in context what happened to the Chagos, and so that audiences can learn about who we are and why we're here. I've also worked with archival material, which I got access to from the museum. And this is a film that I wanted to show everyone. It's very special to me. I wanted to reclaim the archive, and I wanted it to have a Chagossian gaze instead of a white military gaze. So it's got a conversation. I've superimposed it with a conversation I had with my grandparents, either looking at the archive or being at the beach where my granddad had his photo shoot done with me. I'm not sure how to play it from here, if anyone. Okay. Oh, no. Oh, there we go.
Madame PD coucou. Là-bas. Elle met tout la cesserie.
Tu maman, tu travailles là-bas?
Oui. Maman, tu travailles là-bas. Moi, tu as ensemble avec moi, donne un coup de main.
Vrai?
Oui.
Et avant tu l'as que paye tout de moi.
Code-moi pour qu'elle.
Madame Michel ajoute la tâche. 400 coucou plus des coquilles.
Là, nous sorrions. Et compter là.
Et il fait ça excellent, mais là, hein? Toi aussi, tu peux faire ça,
oui,
là?
Oui, c'est moi, tu peux faire.
Zombie, oui, des enfants là.
Oui, c'est moi, tu peux faire ça. Et moi, tu peux sorrir tout le coco là, mettre le mot à la tête, sorrir.
Dans le panier, comme.
Oui.
Tu n'as pas qu'une personne là, donc là.
Là, moi, pas qu'une personne.
Si tu gagnes avant de chiler, ça, tu demandes pour mettre.
Mon père, pas de mon pouvoir. Ça, Marius, ça s'appelle ça Marius.
Marius.
Ouais.
Marius, ça qui était ça.
Marius là, le coco là. Sur des coquilles.
So, lagi Madame PD coucou.
We're not going to watch all of it. So these are the cyanotypes that I mentioned, and it's an accessible process that also involves the sun. And for a lot of people within the community, myself included, the sun is almost this sacred thing. Like it feels like we all come out during the summer. So it's a process that really resonates with me, and I've been working with since 2020. I also wanted to show you this immersive Chagossian living room that we created that only felt natural for me because this is how I received a lot of the history of where my family is from. A lot of oral history gets passed on by the matriarch of the family within living room spaces. And that's how I accessed a lot of the stories that I'm now very privileged to tell. And yeah, these are some of the images we created as well. I don't think I've got a lot of time left. But the exhibition also has a representation of the Grzegorzian Kaz, which is quite an immersive one to, like I mentioned before, kind of be able to go back in memory, but in a tactile, almost sensorial way. Yeah, thank you. That was it. That was Belongers. Thanks, everyone.
Very much. Oh, is this thing on? Yes. Thank you. Who's next? Who wants to follow that? Right. Grzegorz.
Hello, everyone. I got some notes. Probably will not use them at all, but we'll try. My name is Grzegorz Stefański, and I have been commissioned to create a new film in partnership with Brickworks Museum and Art School Plus. And today I'm going to briefly talk about the film and try to maybe not answer this question, but maybe pose this question: why storytelling in art reflects psychological growth in psychology. Sounds serious, but it is not, actually. This is how I'm going to start with how the work looks like, because most of you, I don't think that you saw the work. So this is how it has been presented at Brickworks Museum in this beautiful space, a drying shed, which somehow serves as, in my opinion, like an underbelly of the building and the process of creating bricks. And as the subject of the work is how intergenerational traumas, which is probably linked to your work, are being passed on. I thought that this underbelly of the building is a great space to present the work itself. The work, just to give you a bit more of context, is a part of the art film triptych I'm currently working on. The first part has been created in Tokyo in 2023, and it has investigated the reoccurring pattern in romantic relationships. Second part, Locusts, has moved to the past to look how certain psychological patterns and traumas, where they originate. And the third part that I'm currently developing will move into the future and focus on how psychological growth happens within the more or less integrated psyche. This is just for the context. So Locust was the second part of this triptych. And this is the trailer, so I'm gonna play it. It's a 1 minute long.
I think the one thing is that I am not a very good sleeper. And that is a legacy from the war. Learned to recognize the sound of the aircraft because they were powered by diesel, and the noise there. This is how I know it sounds ridiculous, but it was for you, for you, for you.
So it's obviously just a short trailer to show how the work was actually, what was the final result. When I started working on this project, my starting point was an archive created by a lovely team of Brickworks Museum. It was probably a couple of hours of recordings recorded during the focus group with people living in Southampton and Southampton area just when they were like kids right after Second World War. And the subject of the commission was rebuilding Southampton after Second World War. And I was listening to these recordings, and they were mostly focused on how the area has been rebuilt in terms of buildings and architecture. But the more I was listening to it, I started listening more or less in between words, and somehow I realized there's also this psychological rebuild that must have happened. But participants of those groups were somehow stating that no one was actually talking about what happened during the war, that they've been told to not to think about it, to forget. So I realized that obviously that trauma of the Second World War was mostly swiped under the carpet and not really worked through. And as I'm Polish, and we have similar history of Second World trauma that was not talked and not worked through, and that also was one of the building blocks of Polish national identity. I think in this country is kind of similar, probably more about this heroic side of national identity. So I decided to basically kind of bypass the architecture and dive deep into the psychological aspect of it. So I focused on taking out certain fragments of those testimonies and use them as a dialogue in the fictionalized film that I was about to create. And there are some examples of those fragments. That I was hoping gonna play, but they will not. So I'm gonna jump to. So I used the fragments from the interviews. I used the original voices of the participants of the focus group, and that was the first documentary aspect of this. I was basically building this film from these elements, adding another element, which is documentary element that I knew that I need to have a parent and a real life parent and a child as participants to somehow reflect the situation of the participants of those focus groups when they were children and their parents were not telling them what actually happened. I was lucky enough to find Ben, which is an amazing performer, Ben Ash, and dancer, and his daughter, a rising actress star. So we worked together, and also during the creation of the script of the film, I realized, I learned that they have been building those huts in Epping Forest when Amaya was a child. So I had those couple of documentary elements from archive of Brickworks Museum, from archive of memory of my participants as well. And I then fictionalized it a little bit, well, a lot actually, into this short film that whose storyline could be summarized like this. This is something that I'm putting into the basically a storyline of the film. Father and daughter trapped in a house burdened by generational memories of war strive to escape the claustrophobic interior and create a new refuge. And this is what the film is about on the fictional level. Now if I would try to look at the psychological side of the storytelling and how this film hopefully reflects a psychological growth of the characters and maybe audience as well, is this idea of psychological growth. Is basically in psychology, it's basically becoming more aware. And when we look at the psychological theories, biggest psychological, maybe more traditional psychological theories of Western world, which is Jung and Freud, there is this split in the psyche between what the psyche needs and what the psyche wants. This conscious and unconscious part. And the author of the book, I lost the slide, Into the Woods, his name is Jonathan York. He also says that in films, characters are flawed, and this flaw in the character, this split, is something that drives them to act, basically that propels the story. And the more archetypical the story is, the more the journey is from unconscious to conscious. So when I compared like this, because this film was the first attempt for me to like fictionalize film. So I realized that basically the archetypical stories are journeys towards from darkness to light, from being not aware to being more aware, and this obviously reflects the psychological growth in psychological theories. That's why I was really happy to kind of state that storytelling is a very interesting device to talk about stories of trauma, of psychological growth. And successful happy endings in films are usually when characters somehow transcend this rupture that they have within, like they somehow, they chase what they want, but they actually don't get what they want, they get what they need. And then there's this happy ending, and happy ending in psychology is kind of similar when the client is healed when they do psychotherapy, whenever they are able to somehow hold two opposites in the realm of integrated psyche. And in the context of Locust, of the film, I believe that what protagonists want, they want to leave this kind of frozen relationship that is upside down because the parent is more childlike and the children is more like parent-like, and they want to build like a safe home, and they actually do it. But what they need, which end of the film suggests, is that Amaya, daughter, needs to leave the father and start her own journey. So I somehow unconsciously followed the pattern of psychological growth without knowing anything about the storytelling theory. So it's telling. That's it. And maybe I just wanted to thank all the people that were involved in making this film, because this is also interesting to say that film is a collective effort. And it's not just to thank those people, but also like this collective effort of making films is also probably collective effort of our psyche to heal. That's actually what I think. So yeah, there was like almost 30 people involved in it. So thank you again for commissioning this and everyone involved.
Hi, I'm Cian Smyth, and I am the co-commissioning producer and curator of After the Rain by Company XY. And I'm pleased to say Antoine from Company XY is here with us today. Came in from Paris this morning on the train, which we decided is a lot easier than getting here from Derry. So, if we could play the film, do you want me to click it on? You could just keep it on mute. We don't need any audio. So welcome everyone, and thanks for your time listening to the stories we have to tell. One of the benefits of working with an institution flexible in its commissioning process is that when they tell you we would like to commission an artwork on the theme of conflict, and you respond, I want to make a circus about peace, after a pause to consider, they sometimes say yes. Jenny Waldman and Nigel Hines at 1418 Now, between 2014 and 2018, were brilliant at establishing this flexible way of working. It is essential for ensuring the potential for great art. And I thank the Imperial War Museum for holding to that flexible, artist-led process for this legacy fund. It is not an easy thing to do within long-standing institutions with their built-in systems and ways of working. Our project, After the Rain, by the brilliant French contemporary circus collective, Company XY, was a 2-year-long artwork from start to finish, from the beginning of 2022 to the end of 2023. For Company XY, the process is as important as the presentation of a finished work. In our case, this process involved working with communities who have lived experience of violent political conflict. Company XY are one of the best contemporary circus companies in the world. An artistic collective of 40 artists without hierarchies. They are socially engaged and have devised and developed projects like Les Voyages, a work about building community, creating little perspective-changing adventures in people's everyday lives and being held and lifted as adults. They often ask, when was the last time you were carried or lifted by another human being? It is often the case the last time was when you were a child, and the next time, maybe when you die. Les Voyages is a deeply moving experience wherever you see it. Not only does it literally lift you up, but it uses the human body, sculpturally, to change how you see the architecture and urban planning of your home place. It is this work that inspired me to commission them for a project in Northern Ireland, a place where human interaction has been curfewed and curtailed for most of the latter half of the last century, and the legacy of intergenerational trauma is only now beginning to show its true face. A place where it would also be financial impossibility to host a work like this, if you know anything about the history of its arts funding. A place where politicians insisted the arts were essential to social cohesion at the beginning of the peace process, and more recently, disinvest in the arts so heavily the sector barely scrapes by. Why? That is another story, but thanks to IWM, we at least managed to make this story happen. I also knew Company XY had presented work in housing estates and rural townlands across Europe, quite often in places of deprivation, but also in places like Ramallah and Palestine. I would have loved to focus our project on one discrete community of people, but in our project, we had a larger challenge. Impossible to work with one single community in a place of divided political loyalties. We would need to focus on public spaces that intersect between all communities and hope that after the rain, for one day at least, could invite its audience to look at their shared public spaces a little differently. After 25 years of making work in Northern Ireland, you can sense when it's right to make something in a verbal or non-verbal art form. In 2018, I made a project as part of 1418 Now. Across and in between with the artist Suzanne Lacey, amongst many things delivered a manifesto having engaged over 300 people living along the border in Ireland during the height of the Brexit crisis. Its purpose was to platform the voices of residents in a landscape facing a storm of inaccurate information that would affect their lives in an increasingly globalized geopolitical debate through which their voices were often unheard. We talked a lot, and it was beautiful. Peace, in some ways, is a more difficult, delicate subject. It is difficult to talk about peace before quickly arriving at white doves. And in many ways, peace building, for those of us who live through it, is less verbal and more felt. At first, there is relief that the violence is largely ending, followed by a constant physical and spiritual resilience to sustain that peace. And what contemporary circus does so beautifully is non-verbally express the physical and spiritual resilience of the human body in the face of immense real or imagined obstacles. Company XY's work, in collaboration with the many decades of experience by In Your Space Circus and Circusville, who have been using circus to bring communities together across interface zones in Derry City and Belfast since the Troubles, was a perfect opportunity to break apart some of the long-established narratives about peace building that international leaders like to tell. It simply recognizes and reminds us that it is the passerby in your public square who holds peace in their hands, and we all help ourselves by carrying each other over common obstacles. As you watch the progress of this collaboration, from Les Voyages Derry London Derry in 2022 to After the Rain in 2025, or 2023, I should say, and all the work in between on the screen here, I will take this opportunity to reveal a couple of curatorial rules that inform the development of this project for me. Firstly, we wanted to make an artwork about peace building, not about conflict as such. 2023, the year in which the final work, After the Rain, would be presented, was the 25th anniversary of the Belfast Good Friday Agreement. As these many anniversaries of conflict and peace building arise, the global story of our experience tends to dwell on the history of violent conflict rather than our experience in peace building. Nor does the global story recognize that while the story of peace building may involve a democratic end to violence, it does not mean an end to the political conflict itself. Global and local political leaders regularly take the opportunity to applaud themselves on world stages for achieving peace, but isn't it, in fact, the general public who sustain it? We insisted our project will make an artwork that celebrates the citizens of a place who have sustained peace in the face of political conflict. The physical and spiritual resilience of the citizens of this place is what this artwork will be about. And secondly, we want this project to have a deeply felt sense of legacy. When it comes to places with a history of violent conflict, there is always potential for any project exploring it to be re-traumatizing or at least exploitative. There are a lot of artists and commissioning organizations in the rest of the UK and around the world that want to make work in places like Northern Ireland, quite often about our historical conflict. They also often, deservedly or not, suffer from a public perception of having rolled into town and disappeared post-performance, having got what they needed. We insisted our project must build a meaningful, long-term relationship with local communities and artists. To start, I insisted we need to gift the city an artwork. Company XY's Les Voyages Derry Londonderry, unannounced at the beginning of the project in 2022. No promotion, no branding, just a week-long introduction of surprise interventions in and with communities across the city, and one that at the end said, "This is not the end, but the beginning. We're coming back." After the Rain would be the result of work by a community of friends in love with the place. It is very rare, but there is nothing more exciting than when delivering a public artwork, the city starts telling you about what is happening as if you didn't know. Local security guards and school children and supermarket workers, the gossip mill was working overtime. Who are these weirdos who don't speak, are dressed in black and lift you up? The rumour mill was so hyped on social media, the BBC had to investigate and discover us to tell our story. To have any integrity around this subject of conflict in a place like ours, the project had to be led by artists with a keen sensitivity about trauma, people, and place. It had to be a collaboration that was locally owned within the city of Derry, its communities, and creatives. Company XY and In Your Space Circus commissioned and worked with local musicians, poets, choirs, and street artists. We established training schemes involving local acrobatic circus performers from across the island, most of whom were cast in the final work, some of whom have since gone on to perform with Company XY professionally on international tours. And In Your Space this week has started renovations on a building that will become a circus school in the city, now with lifelong partners in Company XY. This project was a series of beautiful moments. A little old lady carried uphill with her Tesco's shopping. A conga line through Poundland, outside of which a young man is held aloft and paraded through a street on a human throne. A drunk man outside a pub on his phone, continuing his conversation regardless of being cradled by 6 French strangers. I think he's still on that call. He hadn't hung up by the time we left. 20 acrobats leapfrogging across the bogside, and hundreds of strangers holding each other, having formed the base of a human tower, not knowing the performers had already left. Artists and arts organizations are interminably asked what real social value their work has. We complete so many evaluation forms, never read by civil servants and politicians, only for them to ask us again, every election cycle, what our social value is. All I can say is, in this project, we lived it.
Kieran, thank you. Thank you, it's beautiful. I've only got one question to ask all of you and one observation. And please correct me, especially you, Karen, if I'm wrong. We all got roots elsewhere, don't we? All of us. We have roots elsewhere. And we're responding to a world war, World War I, life-changing, epoch-changing, humanity-changing. But it's about here as well. It was interesting to me to be on the committee and to realize that at a very deep level, there's a lot of what British identity or non-identity is wrapped up in war and in this war. And none of us are from this place in that sense. Also, most people don't make art. We create all the time because that's what humans do. But most people don't step up and do that. You do. You also happen to be, all of you, very articulate, which is what you've had to learn to do in order to be able to do what you need to do and get what you need. But I want to go, before I open up to the audience, to a place that you all talked about, but I want to see if I can tease it out more. What was the encounter point or moments for you, as you were saying, the beautiful moment, that you knew what you were going to do, that you knew, well, you know, you never know. I mean, suddenly it's there and it tells you what you're doing. But how did you know that you could do it, or you were going to be in it, or you were going to make it? Because that's always the scary moment, because you're by yourself. Audrey, do you want to start? And we can do this briefly, and then we can open it up. What was that moment like? No, not that you decided, the encounter moment. Because the decision is after that. How did you know what you were going? Talk about Chego. How did you know?
Oh, I don't think I ever thought of that. I think I was driven by curiosity and anger. And I think it's probably the anger, wanting to tell a story that had voluntarily been erased, or stories that had voluntarily been erased, but mostly from the community's point of view. I don't know if I knew. I guess I just went for it.
Did the community say amnesiac itself as a kind of defense, or was it imposed on them?
The erasure,
yes,
it was imposed on them. The community is very vocal, very proud, fiercely Grzegorzian, and I guess my encounter when I started my research, when I started my workshops, it was fascinating to me, the differences in identities, meeting Grzegorzian descendants who were born in the UK, who were fiercely British in a lot of ways.
That's fascinating, yes.
And meeting Grzegorzian natives who were fiercely Grzegorzian. I think that drove why I wanted my workshops to be intergenerational, because I was like, what's the conversation that's going to happen here?
So it was kind of a conflict, in a sense, there, between, say, the root and the disroot.
Yes.
In a sense.
Yes.
And that's your moment as an artist to step in to that juncture and see what can be made, what fruit you can pick out of this.
Yes.
What can be made.
And I think personally for me as well, a lot of my work is driven by homesickness.
Your own?
My own.
Okay.
Being away from home, missing home, idealizing home, and having this love-hate relationship with home too. So I think trying to find home through that work as well.
And listening to you, reminds me of the great World War I poets, because partly the idea of making poetry as a soldier in a war is about not only homesickness, but the need to create home in some way in the middle of turbulence, whatever home is. Grzegorz, for yourself, how did you come to find your subject?
Yeah, I was actually at home from the very beginning in a way, because as Polish, like I read this book last year that it was published last year that somehow beautifully showed that contemporary Polish identity is basically constructed from on the base of Second World War,
Yes.
of victimhood and heroism, which
Yes.
I'm not very happy about.
Yes.
But I had to face it. So when I got this commission, I was like, wow, this is actually like those two nations, Polish and British, they share similar story, basically. I mean, as most of Europe in a way. So that was like, I felt at home, like this is something that I recognized already. And then I also got the archival materials. So I had like, I got like memories of people basically. So I got characters, I got like participants already. So I had a lot at the beginning. And because I made this first film about like psychological patterns in relationships 1 year ago, and I was in this moment of exploring that, I just knew that diving into this history of Second World War and memories of some traumatic experience from the past that informs the here and now is something that I wanted to do. I also kind of deliberately moved away from particularities of the Second World War. For example, in one of the fragments when participants say something about the planes that were powered by diesels, and I think she said they were like Messerschmitts. I erased Messerschmitts because I just wanted it to be more abstract and more about the conflict than a Second World War. So yeah, I mean, obviously I make it sound easy as if I knew what I'm gonna do. Obviously there was like months and weeks of not knowing, and this is, but somehow now I know that I kind of knew that this is my territory and that somehow I need to dig there. So that was quite lucky for me actually to get this commission, to be confronted with like this diving in the past of this nation and my nation and kind of my practice as well. And it's also like very personal, so yeah.
It's also the carving out constantly for 100 years of Poland itself, from the First World War all the way through when it had its moment from the First World War until it was invaded, and then the fight over it in our lifetimes, my lifetime in particular, of the fight over Poland, what Poland is, who the Poles are, is this constant carving out of identity that shapes around war, always around war. And Poland has always been a scapegoat in a sense, a pawn in so much of great power conflict. It's been Poland.
Yes, that is true. That is something that this martyrology of Poland is like very powerful, and I do hope that like my generation is the first one that somehow changes that and sees Polish nation not only as like victims or heroes, but also as something else. And I hope that this history will be rewritten, and identity of my country and of this country and of like all other countries hopefully will not be written by conflicts, but by maybe something more nurturing, basically.
And the great artistic tradition of Poland, all the way back. Kieran.
Well, I suppose, you know, it goes back to what I was saying in terms of, you know, when you're in a place of conflict that is within lived experience or existing conflict, you do get a lot of researchers and artists and commissions and all this wanting to make work about that because it's endlessly fascinating to explore. I suppose after 25 years of making work and exploring those subjects, and it's not exhausted, but when I was offered yet another opportunity to do another project on conflict, I said no, I wanted to do it about peace. And partly that has to do with establishment narratives. I don't mean any specific national establishment narrative, but this idea of being infantilized as a nation, as a place that just fights with itself.
Yeah.
When in fact, actually, it obviously is tied up in many centuries of colonialism and all sorts of different things. And it's really frustrating to be a citizen from a place like that and constantly have to have those conversations in boardrooms around the world or wherever about about, because it doesn't represent who we actually really are. And I spent some time in Chile and Colombia recently, and I really wanted to explore the nature of peace building, that why are we not championed around the world for the amount of work we have done to sustain peace? Why is that not the story? And the fact that we are still in conflict.
Yes.
And part of the reason for that, my personal opinion is that one of the solutions to our conflict was trapping the conflict in a democratic process.
Yes.
And we're supposed to rely on democracy to solve our conflict, when in fact, after 25 years, as a citizenry, you're trapped between a political system that has no incentive to resolve its conflict and life itself. So I just got fed up with words, and I wanted to do a non-verbal art form. I wanted to do something that celebrated people on the streets. And I knew there'd be plenty of other works in the program exploring more complex or difficult or other subjects related directly to conflict. And I just thought, well, I just want to do something that is inspired by the people.
And to work out something in a conflict that is so verbal, so many people talking all the time, talking all the time, talking all the time. You put everything into the human body and just let the human body express itself.
And that's a very central part of you. It's only 25 years since our peace agreement was signed, so you see it. It's over in the last 10, 15 years. We've seen it in bars and restaurants, whatever. The consequences of intergenerational trauma. That is a phrase that is only coming into the discourse now in Northern Ireland. But you see it through your friends and your families, and how it's affecting people through alcohol and drugs and suicide and all sorts of different things. And so the whole experience is very embodied and very felt. And we just, it wasn't as slight as just wanting to lift each other up. It was about owning public space and using our bodies in public space to say this is ours and we're here for each other. And it's really, really deep and complex when it's held in a space like that.
I've talked a lot, and we ain't got no time for you. But anyway, one or two questions of anyone who has a response or a feeling or ask an artist. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all the conversation. It's been great to hear about all the amazing work that you've done as artists and partners. I really liked how, Audrey, you touched on this idea of moving from a white military gaze to a Chagossian gaze when exploring the archives. And also with the circus group, you kind of moved from working with these rigid power structures, like these rigid structures of the institution. You moved away from that and you went directly into the streets and just communicating with people and talking with people in different ways. So I'm wondering if you could, all of you, just reflect a bit more about what does looking at conflict through alternative spaces, alternative approaches and practices, what does that reveal about the traditional power structures that we all operate within? What does that say about the archive when you're moving and you're switching from the traditional perspective? What does that say about community engagement when you're not working within the institution but you're going beyond that?
Now, sadly, we actually haven't got a lot more time. Okay, we got 5 minutes, 10 minutes, somebody said to me. Okay. Let's see if we can do, we've kind of talked about that a little bit. If we can do, all four of us, do a quickie response so we can get another question in. But I feel like in a way, we've kind of addressed it in a tiny way.
At the heart of it, it's the same issue at the center of what conflict is itself. It's trust building. And if you build relationships with institutions who trust you, I am telling them I want to do something that's outside of your comfort zone. Trust me that I'm not going to land you in hot water. And the only reason we got to do our project is years of having built trust with the people who said yes to me.
And it's always about the people at the end of the day who accept you. It's a good question.
Just to answer quickly that question, I think that what I was trying to do is to shine light on how these big political conflicts influence a very particular individual relationships between people, like in that case between parent and a child.
Yes.
Which always we are a reflection of those big conflicts. So it doesn't matter how far we move from them. There's always something that stays within and that needs to be healed, basically. So that was my perspective, I guess.
Okay, Audrey.
I think for me it's about reclaiming narratives. I guess a very recent example, it took us over 50 years to have academic publications be written and done by someone from the community. So our stories and history has always been told from a different point of view that wasn't necessarily ours. So I think for me, it's about flipping the narrative. It's about reclaiming our own history and telling what I believe is the real story or histories. I hope that answered your question.
How do you know when you've encountered someone you want to work with? I mean, just briefly, there's always a question. How do you know?
That's a really interesting question, and it's difficult to make a general statement, but I just reflect on the first phone conversation that Audrey and I had, and both of us were just getting goose pimples about the potential for the project, and we spoke about it, how it felt serendipitous, but it wasn't in a way, because we'd sort of found each other to be able to do that, and it's about trust, isn't it, really? That's the main thing, and you put your trust in the artist, and that was the way that we were hoping to work, to just give over that space, because that's your, you deserve that space to tell the stories. So mine was in the background.
Thank you. I keep getting hand signals. So, I mean, anyone else? Gosh, I think we've silenced everyone. I want to say that, and I don't know how to say this except in my Chicago way, I didn't know that I was going to see this work in this way, because I purposely don't like to come on a stage with artists especially and just be completely like, I know everything and I've got these questions and I'm gonna have these questions ready for you guys and that's it. I wanted to encounter you all. This is, for me, stupendous. And for me, as someone who was not born in this country, came here as an adult, been able to create art and be part of a museum, to me, you all are an extension of something that sometimes I think the British don't celebrate enough, which is that bringing in and listening and paying attention to people who are not necessarily in the matrix, not necessarily in the flow, and to come into this museum, which has always commissioned artists from the beginning, and to say in this country that art and culture are crucial to this country's identity. It is this country's identity, and that is big enough for all of us and all of you. And I'm really grateful to meet you and see your work. For me, it wasn't enough time, but I think we got like a clip now. So, but thank you all very much. Thank you, Siân. Thank you.